Deerfield Beach, Florida used to be safe.
I just had this eerie feeling she wasn't alive.
Where kids could play.
We believe someone murdered her.
But when pregnant women start turning up raped and murdered,
we knew it was a serial killer here in our community.
And babies go missing.
I mean, who would do something to a little infant baby?
It tears the neighborhood apart.
Because now we were thinking maybe they're gonna kill us.
As a serial killer taunts police.
He said to us, if I did it, prove it.
For 30 years, the community never gives up.
We knew that those answers were right here in Deerfield Beach.
Police have confirmed that a predator is on the loose tonight, with a fourth body being found in the
Found dead at the scene, and the killer remains at large. The victim was beaten and left for dead.
And local residents have been urged to be vigilant.
This is the apartment complex right here, 223 Southwest. Angela lived in the last apartment.
24-year-old Angela is the mother of 5-year-old Stacy and 6-month-old Dwayne Jr., whose father, Dwayne Sr., she will soon be marrying. But on March 17th, 1986, all her plans come to an abrupt and violent end.
Around 12 midday, Angela went to the store. She had Dwayne Jr. with her, and she started making her way to the mom and pop store, which is not very far from here. It sends chills every time I come over here. I think about what my sister went through.
But Deerfield Beach used to be a safe place for women to walk the streets.
In the 80s, if I went across town to ride a bicycle, and my parents didn't have to worry about me coming up missing or anything, it's just safe.
You know, it was a nice place to live. You know, all the kids and families, you know, they grew up around here. It was like family.
In the 70s and the 80s, a lot of people did not even lock their doors. That's how safe it was back then. Everyone just had that respect for each other, especially Angela.
This is a spot that we all used to hang out at and play and barbecue and play music, play cards, and just gather.
Just sitting out here sometime till 12, 1 o'clock at night. So, a lot of memories here.
Angela is the eldest child of Josephine and Bernard Adams.
This picture here is Angela. She was 8 or 9, somewhere there.
With that afro?
Mm-hmm.
She loved that afro.
She was still rocking.
She loved to rock that afro.
At the end of every school day, Angela's daughter, Stacy, sees her mom and baby brother waiting for her. But not today.
My wife and I were standing in the window at our house. When I say, that's a little unusual. Stacy walking with her classmates, and she was going home.
Stacy walks 2 more blocks to her house. It's the first time in her life she's had to let herself in.
She just opened the door. It was already open, and she went in. TV was playing, but no one was there.
A frightened Stacy runs to a neighbor. 2 hours later, her uncles, Wayne and Daryl, are heading home from work.
I remember just riding by, and I remember Miss Eloise, my sister's neighbor, standing out on the sidewalk, and she was like waving me. And when I turned around and looked, she called me back. She said, "Come here, baby." She said, "Your sister haven't been here in about 4 hours now, and Stacy been waiting here." And then I grabbed my key, went up to my sister's house, and stuck my key in the door. I remember when I opened the door, Dwayne was sitting in a chair reading. And I asked him, "Where's Angela?" He looked at me. He said, "I don't know." He said, "I've been home 2 or 3 times and she haven't been here."
Wayne and Daryl start searching the neighborhood for their sister and baby Dwayne.
We went down this whole street here, east to west, and we asked the neighbors, did they see her?
As night falls, there seems to be no sign of mother or child.
We felt like we were running out of options that night. We didn't know where to look. I was very frustrated when I went home. I remember just crying, thinking that she was gone, and then I was wondering, where's baby Dwayne?
It's been 10 hours since Angela and baby Dwayne left for the store. Her family go to the police.
At about 10:15 p.m., Dwayne Mitchell, along with the Adams family, they report that Angela Savage and her infant son, Dwayne Jr., were missing.
I didn't sleep that night. I stood in my bedroom window, looking out the window. I wonder where is she at?
I didn't want to believe it, but I just started thinking something sinister had happened to my sister.
The community is already on edge. 5 weeks ago, Cassandra Scott, Angela's 17-year-old neighbor, was found dead in the street.
Over here is the spot where they found her body in some kind of blanket or whatever. She used to protect me all the time. She didn't let no one. She was small like you, really small and tough. She was good. She was a good person. So they took her to the morgue, and they found skin and everything under her nails and DNA on her teeth.
Cassandra also had a mark on her neck and burst vessels in her eyes, but the coroner couldn't prove conclusively these were connected to her death.
They told my mom that my sister died from natural causes, that she had a seizure. And my mom was explaining to them, my daughter never had a seizure before. Why all of a sudden would she have a seizure now?
The close-knit neighborhood was shocked by the diagnosis.
She was my childhood friend. I've never known Cassandra to have a seizure, so I didn't believe that.
It was ruled as a natural death, complications with a teen pregnancy.
Cassandra had only shared the news of her pregnancy with close friends.
We couldn't really tell if she was pregnant or not. And my mom didn't know that either. I can remember her yelling it out in the house. And she was pregnant too. We believe someone murdered her.
The coroner insisted there was insufficient proof of homicide and closed the case. But Cassandra's death left the once peaceful community anxious. 5 weeks later, Angela and her son go missing just 3 blocks from where Cassandra was found dead. And that anxiety explodes into full-blown fear.
Our thoughts turned to both cases was connected, and that's all everyone was saying that whole night. It was 1:30, I'll never forget that, and I just had this eerie feeling right then. She wasn't alive.
"18 hours after Angela and baby Dwayne were last seen, Travis Gamage and his friend are making their way to Deerfield Middle School.
So that morning, we proceed to walk to school, and we take this route every single morning. And as we get ready to turn and go through the path, there was an old little raggedy house there. Oh, the boogeyman's in this house. And when we get to that part, we'll take off running. We entered the pathway. I can see a shadow. And I'm like trying to figure out what it is, and everybody's standing back. As I got closer, I could tell there was a body. And I was saying to myself, like, wow, is this person really dead? And as I got closer, I seen ants coming out of her mouth and everything, and we turned around and boom, we ran, headed back toward the wash house. We told the young lady who was working there, we found the body.
The police are immediately alerted.
When the officers get there, they find the body of a black female lying face up along a gravel road. They suspected that it was, in fact, the body of Angela Savage. Upon my arrival there, I observed Angela to be lying face up. There was a ligature mark around her neck. Her bra was unsnapped, her shirt was pulled partially down, and her pants were unbuckled and open. Her shoes were not found at the crime scene.
The body is just 2 blocks from where Angela lives, and just around the corner from where friend and neighbor Cassandra Scott was found dead 5 weeks ago.
The police were knocking at my front door. He said, "You Miss Adam?" I said, "Yes." He said, "You Angela's mother?" I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "Well, she was found dead." And I went to run out the door by him, and he grabbed me by my and pulled me back. He said, "You don't want to see her."
Then, a startling realization.
I said, "Oh my God. What about the baby?"
The child, Dwayne Jr., was unaccounted for. The officers continued their frantic search of the missing child. But there was no sign of him.
Five weeks after Cassandra Scott's body was discovered lying in the street, her neighborhood friend Angela Savage has just been found murdered nearby, and her 6-month-old baby, Dwayne Jr., is still missing.
Around that time, we started to panic. It had to be a monster. I mean, who would do something to a little infant baby?
I remember just riding home. When we pulled up, I remember seeing like 30 or 40 people standing out in the yard crying.
I was at a loss of words, you know. My mind just went blank. I wanted revenge. It was just a horrible day. Worst day of my life. Worst day of my life.
Then just 30 minutes after Angela's body is found,
We received a phone call from a nearby resident that a child had been abandoned on her doorstep, and it was in fact Dwayne Jr. alive.
baby Dwayne has been left at the home of Julia Wright, a close friend and neighbor of Angela's family.
She seen someone running, getting in a car. and the person drove off. So she never got a good look at the person. Baby Dwayne was cold. He was just wrapped up in a pillowcase or something, yeah, and his diaper was dirty.
Angela's family knew of the Wright family, so it wasn't a random family door they knocked on. Maybe Julia Wright was somebody both parties knew.
Forensics find no evidence of fingerprints or hairs on the baby's car seat or clothing. Detective Giannino quickly returns baby Dwayne to his father, but finds Dwayne Sr. oddly detached for a man who has just lost his fiancée.
He was void of any emotion. I found that his demeanor was kind of standoffish. It just didn't seem right.
Later that evening, things get even more disturbing.
After that night, oh, we couldn't rest. You know, the phone rang and hang up. And they would call, and I pick up the phone and say hello.
Someone keeps calling the family, laughing and mocking Angela's death.
Is Angela there?
Could I speak to Angela? That's the way they laughed in the phone. That hurted me. You didn't know who it was at the time.
But when Angela's mom tells family and friends that she's going to the police about the phone stalker, the calls suddenly stop. That convinces Detective Giannino that the killer is close to home, so he reaches out to the immediate community.
We stumbled upon a witness or two that observed one of our local residents, Larry Florence, had encountered Angela as she was on her way to the convenience store. He encounters her, is trying to talk with her, making advancements towards her.
A neighbor to both Angela and Cassandra, 30-year-old Larry Florence lives on his own, just around the corner from where their bodies were found. Although he's been previously charged for drug dealing, he has no record of violence against women.
Larry Florence was always a strange guy to me. Even as a kid, he was very spooky-like. Word had got around that he was seen talking to her and pretty much harassing and grabbing on her that day. We all kind of suspected him of killing our sister.
While an APB is put out for Larry Florence, the results of Angela Savage's autopsy are released.
The autopsy revealed she had been strangled with some kind of a cord or a rope. Her hands and her feet were bound, and she had been sexually assaulted, and that she was pregnant.
After Angela died, I learned that she was pregnant. Very saddened that the kid didn't get a chance to live. There was an extra layer of tragedy, the double dose.
Forensics takes swabs from Angela's body, but DNA testing is still in its infancy in 1986 and of no help to detectives. "36 hours since Angela was found dead, suspect Larry Florence turns himself in. With no eyewitness to the crime or hard evidence, Detective Giannino needs a confession.
We interviewed Larry Florence at great length, and he was probably the last person to see Angela Savage alive.
Larry Florence insists he only spoke to Angela for a short time around midday, but then left her alone.
We confronted him, and he voluntarily took a polygraph test.
Investigators are confident Larry Florence will fail the test and confess. They can finally bring some peace to the family. But to their surprise, Florence passes. With no clear evidence against him, Detective Giannino has to let him go. With a killer on the loose, everyone in the neighborhood is terrified.
Oh, afraid wasn't even the word, because now we were thinking, especially me, they may know we're the ones who found this body. Maybe they're gonna kill us. And it's scary walking through that pathway by that little raggedy house. That was frightening. You know, you think, oh, the boogeyman is really around here now.
Where her body was found, it was like a little spooky house. Kids would always say, don't go near that house, it was a witch there.
Local kids share stories about hearing strange grunting noises coming from the abandoned house and the monster that kept baby Dwayne wrapped in a pillowcase.
And there was a myth about the pillowcase man, the pig man, different stuff, and it was kind of scary.
Neighbor LaSheila, whose sister Cassandra was found dead in the street just 5 weeks ago, is now even more convinced her family are right about Cassandra's death.
Angela's killer. We always used to think he did her and my sister.
After Angela's murder, Cassandra's family and community appealed to the police to reconsider the case.
I think the community always discounted the natural causes as a cause of death. I think they thought from the onset that there was suspicious activity that surrounded her death.
We were just trying to tell the police that maybe those two cases were connected. We knew it was a serial killer here in our community, and the police need to act quick before they kill again.
Deerfield Beach, Florida is in a panic after the murder of pregnant Angela Savage and suspicious death of her pregnant friend, Cassandra Scott.
To see that two people that I know close to me found dead, that kind of changed my whole outlook on Deerfield Beach.
When we heard about Angela and then Cassandra, it was kind of scary. You begin to think, what's next?
Suspicion turns to those closest to Angela.
We knew that it had to be somebody that she somewhat knew to lure her and to do what they did to her. We knew that those answers were right here in Deerfield Beach.
We started focusing in on Dwayne Sr. as a potential suspect.
Straight after Larry Florence's interrogation, Angela's fiancé is in the hot seat. Police continue to distrust his behavior.
He seemed disheveled, unkept, and angry. He really couldn't account for his time that evening while Angela and Dwayne Jr. were missing.
Dwayne insists he was with his brother Cecil, so officers go to confirm his alibi.
I say, how can he do it? He was with me. I was with him. No, he did it. He did it. I say, that don't make no sense.
But the detectives believe Cecil is covering for his brother.
We confronted Dwayne, and he said to us that if I did it, prove it. And it's not something you typically see in a grieving family member.
Detective Giannino persuades Dwayne to take a polygraph.
There was deception in his answers. Even when he was challenged with a failed polygraph exam, he was still denying his involvement, and again, just telling us to do our job.
But with no hard evidence or eyewitness reports, they are forced to release him back into the community. Angela's family are tortured by the idea that her fiancé may have killed her.
I had a conversation with him later that day, and I looked him right in the eye, and I asked him, I say, Dwayne, did you kill my sister? Did you harm her? And he looked at me, and he said, no way. I believe Dwayne Most people would always tell me, Dwayne did that. And I would be like, no, he didn't do it.
Wayne believes Dwayne was with Cecil, but others are not convinced.
Every time I leave the house, you know, you get that funny feeling, somebody be looking at you and saying, yeah, your brother did it, you and your brother did it. So, even if a wife was saying, why they talking about you and Dwayne did that?
Despite the suspicion surrounding him, Dwayne attends Angela's funeral, along with friends, family, and neighbors they know.
After the funeral, like everybody come to the house. Everybody was here, you know, eating food and talking and getting together.
We had a lot of traffic in my mom's house that day. I would say over 200 people.
But when the crowd of family and friends clears, Josephine notices someone has left something behind.
I saw the bag sitting there because we was cleaning after. When I saw them, I said they looked just like her shoes. She didn't have on no shoes when they found them. Her feet was clean as your hands.
And she said, those are Angela's shoes. I said, yeah. She said, yeah, those are Angela's shoes. Those are shoes she had on. Somebody brought those shoes here.
Angela's murderer left a calling card during the reception, even as the family grieved.
I can't even begin to tell you how I felt, that the killer had been walking in the house. We were all trying to figure out who brought the shoes.
I left them sitting there until like that Monday, then I moved them and put them at the garbage.
She was so upset at finding the shoes, she threw them out instead of just, you know, keeping them. I don't think she realized the significance and the evidence that they had.
The family will come to regret that emotional decision. The shoes could have held crucial evidence. Instead, Angela's case slowly grows cold.
We didn't have the luxury of DNA as it is today. We didn't have the luxury of cameras being at every block. You know, I never gave up hope to represent her and gather that evidence to go forward, 100%.
Years pass with no new leads. 6 years later, in 1994, a new cold case unit opens, bringing in Detective Frank Ilaraza to work the case with Detective Giannino.
The original investigators, they always felt that the case was solvable. When you get the murder cases, the cold cases, and time goes by, years go by, sometimes witnesses do come forward.
The cold case team fund a billboard about Angela's murder in the hope it might stir memories.
It was very hard seeing that billboard up. Just hopeful someone would just call that tip in that we were looking for and needed. And then eventually it faded. I remember it fading. Kind of faded with the hope.
But then just months later, there's a break in the case when a neighbor of Angela and Cassandra's is arrested for domestic violence.
In 1994, Gary Troutman comes into the picture as a suspect to an unrelated case.
Troutman is brought to the station with his wife, and in the squad car, a police microphone records their conversation.
If you love me, why would you try to kill me?
I ain't trying to kill you, no business.
Yes, you was, Gary. I would have been dead if it wasn't for them. You got me on top of me, started choking me. You need help.
His wife quizzes him about something he had said to police before he was put into the arrest vehicle.
They told me that you told them you murdered them, and they want me to testify. Why you tell them people this damn lie?
They don't got no lie.
Gary Troutman has made a startling confession.
We have this guy here that's confessing to a murder.
March 1994, 8 years since Angela Savage's homicide, a man called Gary Troutman wants to make a confession. But it's not for killing Angela. It's for another young woman named Cassandra Scott, whose death was ruled accidental.
His confession is because he's been having nightmares as to what happened to Cassandra, and it's been bothering him, and it's on his conscience.
Troutman says he lured pregnant Cassandra to her death with the promise of free baby clothes. No swabs were taken from the crime scene or tests for rape, but detectives are stunned by the similarities when they compare it to Angela's homicide.
Black female, 17 years of age. Black female, 24 years of age. 4 months pregnant. 4 months pregnant. No footwear found on both scenes. They both lived within less than 4/10 of a mile from Gary Troutman.
Was there undressing in her case as well?
It's almost as similar because she's dumped outside and she had ligature marks around her neck.
What was declared death by pregnancy-induced seizure in 1986 is now being reviewed as a violent murder.
When Cassandra Scott was killed, she had petechial hemorrhaging in her eyes, which is, number one, the first thing that pops up to your head is strangulation.
The police appealed to a new coroner to reopen the case, who agrees that Cassandra Scott's injuries back up Gary Troutman's confession.
Gary came up behind her with a tie and just wrapped it around her neck and squeezed it and basically strangled her until she passed out.
Troutman never admits to why he did it. Word spreads quickly around Deerfield Beach about Gary Troutman. His family are well known in the neighborhood. Gary, Angela, and Cassandra all attended the same school. The monster in their midst was a classmate, friend, and neighbor.
He didn't seem strange or anything. You know, he just seemed like a normal kid growing up.
Angela and them all went to school together, played together. Yeah, we knew the mom and the daddy. They all was family members at my husband's church.
The cold case investigators questioned Gary Troutman in the holding cell about Angela's murder.
Cassandra Scott is dead. Angela Savage is dead. What did they do? What you mean? What did these girls do to deserve to die?
I don't know nothing about that.
DNA was not what it is right now at this time. So without him admitting to it or anything like that, you have to prove it.
July 94, Troutman is charged with the second-degree murder of neighbor Cassandra Scott only and sentenced to 25 years. It's of little comfort to her sister, LaSheila.
My mom always said, y'all make sure y'all find out who killed my daughter. She used to always say that. Always. But when he got caught, no one called us. No one told us anything. No one wrote us a letter, nothing. We didn't even see it in the paper until someone came and told us about it. Like I said, someone was like, you know that man Gary Troutman in jail for killing your sister? That's how we found out.
As the years pass, Gary Troutman continues to deny raping and killing his school classmate, Angela Savage. Then in 2002, Angela's fiancé, Dwayne Sr., the only other main suspect, dies, aged 40 of cancer. The children go to live with Angela's family, who all now fear they will never see justice.
I pretty much lost all hope that the case was ever gonna be resolved because I was pretty much more or less thinking whoever killed Angela had left Deerfield Beach.
And then 10 years after his conviction, the unthinkable happens. Troutman is up for parole for good behavior.
Gary Troutman was released from state prison, and he went, out of 25 years, he wound up doing 10 years, and he got out.
I couldn't understand how someone could murder two people, Cassandra and her unborn child, and be released from prison in 9 years for good behavior. There's no good behavior for murder. Come on. No.
Troutman is a free man. Convinced that he killed Angela, her family are furious and still determined to get justice 29 years after she was murdered.
I remember a reporter that writes for the local newspaper here. I went to her and I just started telling her about the case. And another local reporter, I just started telling, and that blew everything wide open again.
With Angela back on the front page, Detective Ilaraza persuades the DA to reopen the case and submit the forensic evidence collected from Angela's body for DNA testing.
They started to work it. They put it into the CODIS system, which is the national database for DNA. Within like 3 days, I came back with a hit. They had a match to, guess who? Gary Troutman.
Detective Ilaraza finally has enough for an arrest. But just 2 weeks after his prison release, Troutman has disappeared.
He was not living in Pompano or Deerfield. We didn't know where he was.
But detectives fear that wherever he is, Troutman is planning his next attack. Police are desperately trying to hunt down killer Gary Troutman.
I started attending the roll calls at all the districts showing the photo that we were looking for this guy for murder.
2 months after Troutman goes missing, an officer recognizes the photo.
One of our deputies in the Fort Lauderdale district says, "Oh, I know that guy. He hangs out in this park over here. He's homeless." We go out that night and there he is, sleeping on a bench.
Detective Ilaraza can't believe his luck and finally brings Troutman in for questioning.
Angela Savage? She had a little baby too, a 6-month-old baby. You remember her?
Yeah.
Okay.
He just plays games. He won't open up.
You're telling me you did not kill, strangle, rape this girl?
I did not. So what are you trying to portray me, a serial killer or something? Just kill people just to be killing people?
But it's only a matter of time until he gets caught in his own lies.
At one point, he screwed up because when he starts talking to me about Cassandra Scott's murder, and then he says, well, you know, Angela Savage's murder had more blood in it than Cassandra Scott's.
I don't understand, because it was blue.
There was blood?
Not as much. And it's like, I just can't tell you now.
And then all of a sudden, he realized what he had said. I charged him. It was like close to 1 o'clock in the morning.
Detective Ilaraza rushes over to Angela's family.
That was a moment that I will never forget. I remember just falling on the ground outside, screaming yes, pumping my fist on the ground, on my knees, saying, "Thank you, Jesus."
After 30 years, Dwayne Mitchell's name is cleared of any suspicion.
Early on, seeing his demeanor at the scene, the interviews, the subsequent failed polygraph, all led us down that path. But in the years to follow, in the time to follow, it was apparent that what we were witnessing was the evolution of this person's grief and his loss. And it consumed him. It absolutely consumed him.
Though Troutman never offers a full-fledged confession, police and Angela's family believe that his description of Cassandra Scott's murder provides clues, and a theory emerges of what happened to Angela that fateful day.
Gary Troutman just came through the path and called her, and as she went up to the house, I believe probably hit her with a blunt object, knocked her out, kept her, gagged her, tortured her, and kept her for those 17 or 18 hours that we didn't know where she was at. It worked with him with Cassandra Scott.
So why not try it again?
Why not try it again?
After his killing, he continued to torture the family. No one can believe that this monster was a neighbor, classmate, friend. Just one of them.
And this is the path that used to lead over to the Troutman's old house right here.
And it's so ironic that Cassandra Scott used to live right there.
Right here.
We all lived here. We all played in the street together. And it's so sad that both of them ended up dying 5-6 weeks apart, right over here.
Troutman is sentenced to 30 years for the rape and murder of Angela Savage.
He walks out of court, looks over at us, and starts smiling and laughing. I hate him with a true passion. The brutality that he inflicted on my sister. Just, I can never forgive Gary Troutman. And I go to church all the time. I'll be reading from James chapter 1. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord.
With Troutman behind bars, the family tried to move on.
It changed our family forever. She's just one of the best sisters you could ask for.
Sometimes I, just cry. Special birthdays. Think of her so much. At least he behind bars. But the problem is, I wonder how long he gonna be back there though.
The community fear Gary Troutman has killed more women.
I do believe there are other victims out there besides these two girls.
And he may get the chance to kill again.
Gary Troutman could potentially be out in 2026. Even though he got a 30-year sentence, it's only a murder in the second degree. I hope they would take into consideration his prior conviction, because we're not talking about one girl, we're talking about two girls. We're talking about a serial killer.